how to prioritize self-care in your life and what it looks like for each person. So talk about that for you and your journey on this. And that's why I'm going to keep referring to the book, because I was just like, man, she's just one of those people. And I think we can all be guilty of this. Strong women, we're out there, we're doing our thing, we're doing our jobs, we're raising our kids, we're volunteering at church, we're on the PTO, and we look like we've got our stuff together. We fool the world, because underneath all that, we are exhausted. We are not administering self-care. We are covering up and putting on one show in one place because we are just trying to keep everybody happy and make sure everybody is the best they can be and putting ourselves in them. And you've been there. So walk us through your journey with that, and then how that ties into all that you do, including launching what you're going to be launching with your Free with E coming up here soon.
So many things. Well, you know what? I love that you are bringing up the book, because, you know, people think the book's going to be about sex trafficking, and it's really not.
No.
Surprise.
No. I know.
It's going to like stir things up in you and bring you to your next level and shock you of what it's bringing up. But I think it's the season for that stuff to come up. And so, like, as I'm listening to you talk, I just hung up with a really good friend of mine in Texas, and she was talking about how we're rolling out this new stuff. And she said, you know what, you're right. So we all look so good. But most of us, it's because we come from trauma. And I'm like, I know. I said, the women that are killing it, we know how to compartmentalize because of what we've lived through. So
yes.
You can like put a goal, just like you used to block out everything else. You know, I might have this happen. I might have this abuse. I might have that. But man, I'm going to put it in a box. And I think that's part of our strength. And until we get enough healing, we're operating out of that crazy, right? And it's exhausting. And, you know, I remember when I was pregnant with my third child in Chicago, because, you know, I grew up in Chicago. With my third. So they're like 22 months apart, 18 months apart. Then I was pregnant with my third. And one morning, my kid didn't sleep. The baby didn't sleep. My 5-year-old or 4-year-old was like at my bed. Mommy, let's do a craft at 7 a.m. And then I just like snapped. I thought I was going to have 4 kids. I'm like, I'm never having any more kids. I'm done. Like, I'm exhausted. And I called my friend and I said, I just can't do it all anymore. I can't do it all. And she goes, well, thank God, because we're all sort of sick of you. Like, take off your Wonder Woman belt. She goes, what's with you and this Wonder Woman belt anyway? Like, you're not supposed to do it all. I'm like, what?
Well, yeah. And talk about that too, because I think when you have trauma, we get on this track, and I'm speaking from my own experience, that we've got to like, all right, I'm going to show the world. I'm going to impress. I'm going to be on all the time because I am better than, you know, just to prove to ourselves.
And what's our catchphrase? Oh, I got it. Oh, I got it. No, I'll do that. No, I got it. It's fine. I got it. It's like, I have nothing. I always say now, like, I just faked it all the time. I was just, you know, but I was thankfully tuned into God because he would carry me through. But now if I, you know, talk about where my journey has gone with self-care, I think learning for me, quite honestly, because what that is codependent, right? So we had codependency. Yes. We felt more responsible for everybody else's feelings and everything in their life than our own. And that felt like we were taking care of it all. And it felt good, to the cost of our own health and the cost of our own sanity and our healthy relationships where they should have been. And I think for me, when I finally started learning to say no, I felt so mean. Like it was such a hard, didn't you feel mean when you started to have boundaries?
And guilty. And what are they going to think of me? Oh, they're not going to like me. Oh, I'm going to disappoint them all the time.
And I think that's how you know you still have some codependency in you. Like when you're like, have a really great boundary and you know you can't do it, you feel bad, guilty, or mean. And you're like, oh, I still have some work to do. And so I have an offer for you later. I think learning that 2 things, and I love Henry Cloud, right? And I think that your no being more important than your yes, because what still I have to worry, it'll fly out of my mouth when someone says, hey, can you? Oh, sure. And then later I'm like, why did I say that? I have no interest. I'm probably going to back out of it. Like learning to shut up before we throw out our yes, and learning that our no has to be way more used than our yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So that piece. And then another piece that really, even in the last year or so, COVID, I think, was helpful because it gave us permission to be done. You know, that Henry Cloud talks about necessary endings. There's some relationships that were just part of what we were doing. Yes. That weren't fulfilling, that you would just come home like, why were we doing that for 4 hours? Like, I would have rather been on my couch in my yoga pants.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think learning to be done, learning to say no, learning when it's no longer a season, you know, and I think loving our family because, you know, us as those super doers, our family often feels like they're not even first. Yeah. All we care about is our family, but we got everything else and we're managing everybody else's, you know? So for me, it's been really growing into, there's very little I do anymore. And people don't believe me, but there's very little I do. I'm very often home in my yoga pants on my couch.
Well, for the things that you are doing, you're doing the things you care about and you're passionate about and align with your why, which we will talk about in a minute. Confidently setting boundaries. How did you do that? Because boundaries are tricky. My daughter Sierra, in one of our first episodes talks about this. She's like, I love setting boundaries. I'm awesome at setting boundaries. But the problem comes to be when someone crosses that boundary, and that is not a person that maybe practices that in their life, how you communicate that to them in an effective way. So she was in a meeting with her boss who did not have that same kind of scope. And she's the very first time she has to practice this boundary that she has set and is so excited about. It's with him. And she's got to like dive into it with him. So it's like, okay, it's one thing to set them. Then even for me, I would say setting them was difficult because I didn't know that they existed for me.
And even like setting them with the conversations you don't want to have anymore, like being done with toxic things and things that are triangulation. Like I was raised in a very ethnic Puerto Rican, Greek, Italian, Irish, like everybody fresh off the boat and no boundaries. Like it's what they talk about, like a total enmeshed, like we were all over each other and in each other's business. You know, part of the reason I moved to Florida, you know, it's so intense. But I remember when I first started, even with family, practicing those boundaries because everyone gossiped about each other. And that's, you know, there was so much that I was groomed for in my family that I grew up in, that's how I started my life with the toxic, wrong relationships that were just sort of normalized and being done with that. And I remember with even my mom, you know, my mom is still a struggle for me. And I would say she would start talking about a family member or gossiping about somebody. And I was like, you know, Mom, I don't want to hear that about her. You can call her and you can tell her how you feel, but I would rather, you know, she comes from this, she comes from that, like comes by it honestly, like, I don't want to hear it. Like, let's love her. She needs love. And like the anger that stirred up.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. And for people that don't understand, it's one thing to set boundaries with other people in your circle that are setting boundaries and then respecting those. But it's a whole other conversation when you've got to uphold those with people that just don't live that way. Or do they, or want to?
No. And then they just go and talk about you.
And then you've got to release that. I mean, it's just so many layers to that. I mean, so that's a great example with a mom. Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. I know that you believe this. I believe this. They're tied together. If we are not taking care of things and our emotional health, it's going to affect it's going to show up physically in some way. Talk 100%. About that journey for you. 100%.
You know, I think, and for me, even in like just being in my head and the worry I'm so much better. I talked to my husband, my new perfect husband. His name is Mr. Good. I get to be the good wife.
That when I saw that when you guys got married, was it a year ago?
It was two and a half. I don't know. 19, April 2019.
Okay.
But I'm Mrs. Good now, the good wife.
Yeah.
So I'm new to him. And I'm like, oh, if you would have seen me 20 years ago, dude. This is the new improved version. But I mean, I used to, you know, the mental health and the worry. I mean, I used to have ulcers. I didn't even tie it. And for now, I say it's food and taking care of your body and how you feed your spirit and who you let pour into you. Like I have this talk on, I don't know if it's on my Free with E website, but I got to speak to like 19,000 Marines and Air Force at like this lift.
Oh, wow.
Instead of a TEDx, they called it LiftX, is their leadership thing. But my talk was the upside down model of leadership. And I feel like one of the only reasons I've been one of the reasons I've been successful and protected, I want to say protected, is because I have, one of my things I taught was F.E.E.L. Like I believe in this F.E.E.L accountability as a leader, because when you do something on your own, you could talk yourself into anything. And if you're strong, right?
Yeah.
Come a lot, you could be manipulative and you could talk anybody into anything.
Yeah.
So for me, another piece of that is to have a personal board of advisors that are invested in your mind, body, spirit. And so for me, on one of my organizations that I run now, my entire board of directors, they're like who I F.E.E.L to. They know me emotionally, they know me spiritually, they know me inside out. One of the things with everything I've run, we built into our organizations, self-care. Like we pay for a self-care basic policy for people. We pay for inner healing appointments, trauma clearing appointments, because I don't even think we realize, especially in the work, I worked in the sex trafficking field.
Yes.
Sticks to you. It jumps off.
Yeah.
If you had it buried here, it's no longer buried and you're back in trauma and things are coming up. So I believe every person, and that's why now what I'm rolling out is that for every woman, like that level of healing. But I think it's vital. I mean, when I was working in advertising in Chicago, every Sunday night I had a stomach ache. I was sick. I would call in sick because I was so mentally stressed. I was in a job that wasn't good for me, around people that were toxic, eating the wrong garbage that didn't work with my body.
Yeah.
And it's one thing. I think it's all one thing. And if you come into agreement in your head with sickness, you're going to feel more sick. You're going to, if you're not praying and saying, okay, God, I'm not going to come into agreement with this one. I think it's a slope. And I think some people think that sounds crazy, but I think it's real. It's real.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great examples. And I love all of those opportunities that your people have to get that help, because every place, every board, every place should have.
I know.
How much healthier would we be as organizations, as a country, as a culture, if we embrace that? I mean,
I was talking to an insurance, there's a Christian insurance thing called MediShare.
Yeah.
They don't cover any mental health. I'm like, the Christian world should be leading this, because
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, secrets
that make us sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
absolutely. Secrets and the burdens that come with them. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's going to have an effect. Thank you. That's awesome. Maybe let's put that out there to the world. Like, people, add this to your wellness plans. How can we support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically?
You know what? I think we have to be the first to start out not being perfect. Like, people will meet me and they're funny. They're like, oh, you look so good, but you're like a nutball. Like, I'm just, if you don't know me, you might put a picture and think I'm this little something package. And I'm so transparent. And I think the thing that we can do for other women is not walk in a room looking like we have it all together. We might look like when we walk in, but the minute you open your mouth, be as real as you can be. I'm always dropping truth, and I'm always dropping what I'm dealing with, because I want to give permission to other women to do it. Because honestly, don't you now, like for me, I'm almost bored. If somebody shows up and they're like, oh, I'm perfect. Oh, I'm great. Oh, I'm this. I'm like,
yeah,
boring.
You haven't done your work.
The message hasn't gotten to them yet that it's okay. So I think we got to lead by example, lead with our crazy authenticity. Just roll it out there.
No, I love that, because I think too, as we run through the world and take care of everyone and try to carry all these burdens and be the fixer, we end up apologizing for a lot of things that we have that aren't in our range. They aren't in our box. We aren't accountable for. What do you have to say to women about that? Does the women's that are saying sorry for everything? It's like, wait a minute.
You know what? And you watch a guy, and a man doesn't do that. No,
you're absolutely right.
Yep. They don't. And I'll talk to my husband. I'm like, I just feel so bad. He's like, move on. He's like,
I know.
But it's like our programming, our grooming. My book is grooming. It's grooming. Our grooming. And you know what? Very little is our responsibility also. Like if we really look at what we're supposed to line up under God, our family, ourselves, like we are not responsible for other people's happiness, and we're not responsible for a lot of the things that people try to make us, and we're just used to being responsible for. So it's just a beautiful journey to discovering how free we're supposed to live. And getting there, I think, is super fun and shocking. And it's hard to get there, but that's like my passion. Like I love getting people there because
and hence the free with E.
That's the free with E.
Absolutely. The importance of setting and coming back to your why in everything you do. And you kind of touched on this earlier. You talked about the fact that you're at home in your yoga pants because you're only doing those things that you are feeling truly aligned to. How did you get there? How did you move from where you were to really like, okay, that does not align with the things I'm most passionate about?
Well, I don't know if it's everybody when they're younger and when they're unhealthy or whatever, but I mean, people talk about all the time, FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Yeah. And, I should be there because there's always something that I should be at and I should be there. And I think that should, I've taught my kids, now my daughter's like, Mom, stop shitting on me. And I think we are the queens of should, and we shouldn't, there's not a lot we should do. And I think that having that freedom and that permission to be okay. I mean, when I worked in different series, I just think, ask me again, which part of it do you want me to speak to? Because my mind, there's like 3 things I could say right now. What do you want me to share?
Speak to how you got to the point where you were totally comfortable. Like I can say no to that, where your no's became more important than your yeses, which really makes you make decisions based on what your true why is. What was your journey to get to the point?
Well, you know what? I think part of it too is, and especially for women that are working in a field that's their passion, or a field because it becomes blended, your identity.
Yeah.
The biggest crux of this is, what is your true identity? Because your identity has to be who you are, not what you do. And more often than not, it's what we do or who we do it with versus who we are and what we're passionate about, what we're called to do. And I think that I would get caught up. And I think for me, I was always in some sort of a field that I was needing to have people, I was in sales or I was in fundraising, right? So I needed to, so there's like a crazy blur there of overdoing, because you think you always have to be on. Yes. And I think that's in a lot of fields, that thinking we always have to be on and we always have to be available. Because you know what? Maybe if I talk to them today, it's going to turn into a sale, or it's going to turn into a gift, or it's going to turn into. And I think for me, it's been that piece. I've been learning to, I always say, like, picture yourself like, when we're doing stuff, and there's 2 sides of it. Like there's hard stuff, and sometimes you just got to do it anyways. It's hard and you're scared, but sometimes we're pushing. And what I've really tried to discern, and I talk about discernment a lot, and like discerning truthfully in the spirit, like, what am I pushing that is not even a door that's cracked, and I'm shoving on a closed door, versus, now I'm always like, God, swing the door wide open. You should be able to tap something and you're going to feel it. You're going to feel the momentum. You're going to feel the favor. And I'm trying to live. I'm always like, stay in the favor, wait for the peace. Because there's different ways to do life. And I'm finding now, like, even with this new program I'm building, I'm like, I got to be calling all these people. And God's like, I've already lined up the people. Like, there are women that are just going to be drawn. They need it. Yeah. And I think getting out of I have to, and it's all about me. And if I don't put myself out there more, and it's just an identity piece and trusting, right? And letting go of the responsibility, the outcome. I think we do what we're supposed to do, and leave the outcome to God. It's not always push.
Well, and trusting that, again, it's not all on you to produce all these things, and that takes so much pressure off.
Hard one to grow into. But
it is 100% still working on that, but know exactly what you mean. Getting to a point where you're able to live out of your own expectations versus others' expectations. And there's a part in the book, and I forgot to bring the book in with me. So that's total on me being totally transparent.
That's all right. We'll wing it.
Page 101 and 102 of Groomed. If you've owned Groomed, when you get groomed, look on there. And it really talks about the expectations that are laid out from that we hear early on from our churches, from our parents. This is how you do things. If you do this thing this way, it makes you bad or sinful or not producing enough, and these are the themes and messages we start hearing from a very early age. And all of a sudden we're like, we're just trying to keep everybody happy, and we're trying to be perfect, and we're trying to not disappoint God or our families or our spouses or our friends or our bosses. And it just becomes this twirl of exhaustion that's not what God intended for us. But these are the patterns that you go into. So you talk about that in the book. How did you get to a point of moving from that to being comfortable in living out of the expectations you set for yourself,
right?
And moving out of that grooming.
Yeah, I mean, I'm better, but we all still have work to do. Ladies, absolutely. Keep working on it.
Exactly.
Right? But when you're talking, I was envisioning like a pinball machine. Like I'll be doing something, I think it's great, and then I run it by maybe. Now, who influences me now? I think we come through stages. Like I used to people didn't even know what they thought of me was a big deal. And now it's different. Family members might still have a little, sure. But it's like a ping ball, and you go for that one, then that one, the pinball, but for me, like growing up, I was so aware that my dad wanted me to present a certain way. I was so aware that since he was here from Puerto Rico and was trying to acclimate and not look Puerto Rican, we lived in a Jewish neighborhood when I was little, that we moved to, we never stayed with our, West Side Story, stay with your own kind. Stay with our own kind. And we would go out, and he would literally say to each of us, I can't believe you're doing that. And why did you wear that? And when you said that, and I'm like, and then even when I remember being in grad school, a word out of his mouth was like, oh, but you could have been a brain surgeon. Like, oh my gosh, like what?
Wow.
Not like for master's in clinical psych, or I think I might have been in the PsyD, the doctorate program. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I think just over the years, like learning who matters. And not very many people's, because some people's opinions should always matter.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And giving who do we give rights to our mind? Like who do we let in our head? And it should be like, who do we let in? Like a big one for me has been, who's worthy of speaking into my life?
Yeah.
I think because of my codependency and how I was raised, and I want everyone to feel good, it's like, what do you think? And then they tell me what they're thinking. What do you think? Like, and that's almost like being a garbage collector. Like, it's not my job to collect. I am no longer a garbage can. Like, I'm not open for business because they're not even knowing everything about me, and I'm asking them to speak into me. And that was a big season of my life where I let too many people speak into me. And now my big thing is like, and it's not pompous. And I think as women, who's worthy of speaking?
Absolutely.
You are so valuable, and who really knows enough about you that you give them voice in your head? It's a little space. It's high rent, location.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And it's about us recognizing our value, and we're worthy of that. Brady calls it our square squad, and we really have a square squad, and they're the ones that we weigh in with and get to weigh in on us. And if you're not in that square squad, then we'll be kind, and it won't be rude about it, but it's not going to play into exactly. It's
water off a duck's back.
Exactly. And we've had to move into that. Yes. I really appreciate your thoughts on that. Have a nice day.
Yeah. I even remember in business when one of my first advisory board members taught me, because when you're running something public, people always have an opinion. And she taught me to just pivot and say, oh, that is awesome. Thank you. We'll take that under advisement. Then they feel heard, and then you move on.
Yeah. And that's a great way to do it too, because again, we want to maintain our empathy and our kindness and all those things. But because I think sometimes people get confused when we start living out of our own expectations and we set boundaries, that I don't want to be selfish. I'm like, if you think you're being selfish, I guarantee you're not being selfish.
Right. Exactly. Selfish people are not sitting around thinking they're selfish. They are just plowing narcissistically through the world.
Exactly. Oh, that's absolutely true. So clue number one. I think that's just such a big, important part of not who we give our energy to. We have this amount of time, and we get to decide who we give it to, and taking that back and allowing us to be, we get to, set those expectations and decide who gets our time. I'm really excited to hear your answer on this. And it's about accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. And that means accepting all the things about us, all of our experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly. We tend to want to push away the yucky stuff, ignore it, not deal with it. And instead of integrating it, because as much as I don't want to go through some of my very difficult experiences and sometimes abusive experiences again, they still built me into who I am. And they still gave me some ways of living life, some resiliency that have made me who I am today. But those are things we tend to not, especially when we're concerned about what others are thinking, which is another reason we need to get away from that. But how do you accept those layered aspects of yourself and integrate that? What is your process with that?
Yeah, because you know what? I think there's so many parts of us, especially as women, right?
Yeah.
So many layers, and there's so many different pieces. And I think, getting comfortable and not having to hide any of them. And sometimes I show up and I'm so serious and I'm so business and I don't have time for this. And I'm just, there was somebody took a picture of me and I had like this face, probably like, and my Vanessa, who used to, she's like, that's your face when you're listening to someone and you're like, oh, this person's crazy and I can't wait to get out of here. And we laugh about it because people call me face. Like I have a hard time like faking it for you. Like that was always my nickname, face. Oh, here comes face. Because I'm like, why should I pretend? What's interesting to me is I've had people come back to me over the years because I've managed, at one point we had 80 people on staff at Selah, and I've had people come back and thank me. They're like, I hated you at the time. Like you were a tough boss, but I speak truth. And I think the favor we don't give each other is when we just don't give. I mean, not like in meanness, but if you're not giving feedback to help somebody, we all have blind spots. And, so I think it's once you get aware of your blind spots, like I've had a lot of blind spots, but I've had a lot of people that have really, I am very open to, I'm always on a journey of inner healing, and I think we're always being formed. And I always have people that are speaking into me, and I'd say weekly, and I'm not saying I run to therapy, but I now only run with friends and people in my life that have wisdom or more wisdom than me that speak into me. And I'm aspiring, we're all aspiring to be more Christ-like, and it's authentic. And I think that there's pieces that there's parts of myself that I probably would have pretended I wasn't in the past, or, my husband will say, my dad when I was little would call me mercurial. You're either like, everything's wrong, or you're like, change the world, everything's up. And now I embrace that part of myself, because you know what? I am like that. And my husband's always like, you're a little wild, babe. You're a little wild. And I think that's who I am. But there's some days that I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I won't take a phone call. I'm on the couch. And I used to be like, oh, what's wrong with me? Am I depressed? I'm not depressed. I think being that mercurial, not bipolar, I promise. But I think there's stuff that just stirs my spirit, and I can go like the words in the beginning, like another word would be relentless. Like if something is dropped in my spirit, I'm relentless, and I'm like, giddy up. And I'm like, the other day, my husband came, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I was doing jumping jacks. I'm like, there's just so much going on. I'm in the kitchen joke. I'm like, I'm so excited because there's so much happening so quickly. But then I'll have days where I'm like, I don't want to go. I just want to stay home, honey. I just want to stay home. And I'm just not like depressed, but I'm exhausted. And so I think being okay with our parts of our personality, we don't always have to be Miss Susie Homemaker and smile and, dressed and perfect. I think be okay with just real. And I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. And what it leads me to is in your book, and I know I keep talking about it, but I love this book so much, but you're very open. You're very like, there's no secrets. You put it all out there. At what point did you decide to do that and get comfortable with that? Was there any, because I would say probably based on the book, 20 years ago, you might not have felt okay doing that.
No. Yeah. 20 years ago, like I even say in the book, when I worked in advertising in Chicago, I was into perfect land. I was into perfect, and I was hiding. I had so many secrets. I mean, I had a whole hidden life. I would eat too much, drink too much. I mean, I would shop too much, everything. I had everything going on behind the scenes. And I would show up and I would feel invisible, which none of us are invisible. We've been groomed to believe we're invisible. And so I would like stop on the way to work in Chicago and go to Marshall Fields on State Street and like buy a whole new outfit because I'm like, I just don't feel, I felt so empty and not worthy, but I always had these great positions and I was always with these people and I was seen and I was at NBC, I was in media, I was in different, and I didn't feel it. And I think that, over the years, things just transitioned and which way do you want me to finish it? Which way? The book you were talking about, which part of the book?
On 101 and 102, where you talked about how you kind of were able to shed all of those expectations.
I think what happened, because that was how impression management I was into. Like I was very much into impression management. I was groomed to impress. I was groomed to show up and look a certain way, even if I didn't feel it. And I think really, quite honestly, when were we together? 2015, probably 2013, 2012, 2011. It's almost been 10 years. We built Selah. And I think when you're building something and it's a movement of God, like it was sort of starting the sex trafficking movement in America. A lot of people were launching at that time.
Yeah.
It unearthed some stuff. And so when things start getting unearthed in you, you have options. You have the options to pretend they're not being unearthed and just fake it anyways and keep going on with that. Or you have the option to think there's something there. I'll maybe look at that later. Or you could dive in. And my whole mantra has always been diving in. And in my past, I've always dove in, but I wasn't hitting the deepest places, I guess. And that's why I love, I call this program I'm rolling out a journey to more, because there's always more. Because I thought it was there. I didn't know how faking it I was. I really didn't.
Yeah.
And when I finally did leave my husband, I think the hardest thing for me, and I think what humbled me and grew me over these last 6 years so deeply, is the people that said to me, "Oh, we're so glad. We don't know how you." And I was so embarrassed. I was just so embarrassed because I thought, man, I thought I had it all together. Like I used to say, I could do this. If I could save victims from sex trafficking, I could make this marriage work. But, you're blind to the areas that I was doing anything to try to keep up the impression management, and I was dying inside in many ways. So I think my journey of real healing in that area has been over the last 6 years, honestly. And so reading this book and sharing all that stuff, when I was asked, I had an agent for years, this guy, he's like, "You're going to do great stuff." I'm like, funny, but he just stayed with me, and he's like, "You will." And he was a big agent. He put out a lot of big books. And he said, "Listen, some pub houses are asking if you're going to write." And it was right in my middle of my divorce. And I'm not able to write, Chip. Like, I don't even know my story. Like, it was everything in me was inside out. Like, I was just, and I went to my group of accountability, like some of them are on my board now. And I spent 5 days and just went for my self-care because they do a lot of, ministry and inner healing. And stuff came up and out. And I at one point I said, I have my book. I know what my book's going to be. My book's going to be called "God Was My Pimp." I think I finally reached a point that I was like, screw this. I have tried to be perfect my entire life, and I've done everything in my power to present perfectly. I was Joe Church lady. I played all the roles, and you know what? I got screwed anyway. And you know what? I'm pissed. So thank you, God, for putting me out there and pimping me in that way, because I was always, and so he's like, "All right, I love it, but that title will never work." That's what groomed is. Groom is pretty much like the jig is up. And you know what? you have stuff too. So let's just get real, because who has time to stay here? I mean, stop faking it and let's get our act together. And so that's what Groomed is. It's sort of me on the other side going, you know what? I didn't even know all those stories in there. I didn't know I was, later.
And I think that's so important in how we accept all those layers of ourselves, how we're not keeping secrets. We're not hiding. We're not afraid for people to know, because that's exhausting. Right. And it is so freeing when we finally are like, no, I'm not playing that game. I'm not playing the game anymore. I'm not playing the game. I'm not contributing.
And all of a sudden you see that you were playing a game. I didn't even know I was playing a game. I was so used to just pretending and being, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe all the free time I have, because I don't really care.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think about, as I've walked through my journey, I think about the people that I knew 7 to 10 years ago. I'm like, they wouldn't even know me anymore. I mean, I laughed when I started doing this podcast. They're going to listen to this and wonder who this person is, because they thought they knew me, and they knew me as that person then. But, I've taken on just such a different shape, but it's been exhausting. It's been difficult.
The journey to becoming is quite a lot.
Yeah. Yes, it's
a journey to more.
Yes, many layers, and not for the faint of heart. But I can tell you, and I know that you believe this too, is it's worth the journey, and that's why I can't wait. I can't wait for what you're going to do with women with this new program, because it's just going to provide them such an opportunity to finally be who they are.
I know.
If you're willing to jump in and face the music and do the work. I mean, there were so many, because we live in such states of denial. I mean, my husband told me for years, anxiety, worry. I'm like, no, the world's just a hard place, and we've got a lot going on. I don't have an anxiety problem. I don't have a worry problem. And and finally in the fall of 2019, I was like, maybe I do. It's just like, I've been waiting 28 years, but you got there.
But you know what? I think it's for such a time as this. Like, I have heard woman after woman like you, like influential women that are all of a sudden taking their position. And it's like layers and blinders are falling off, because I think it's vital. Like what you're doing here and getting these messages out. Women are starving for authenticity. Starving. And there's so much counterfeit out there, and do this, try this, follow me. And I'm like, I know some of these people, I'm like,
not them.
But there's a hunger right now. So I think some were prepared to start raising up others. Together we rise, and it's time. It's time to rise. And so I think that's why. I mean, you were prepared for what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Time to rise, and time to take stigma off conversations that people have been afraid to have, that have been, decided that they are, not appropriate, when it comes to all kinds of things. Our home, I had a whole episode a couple episodes ago with my producer, Valencia, who's launching her own brand and podcast. And a lot of her work and research is about women's cycles and how they affect us throughout the month. And so taking the stigma off these things, because guess what? We've all got one. We
need to talk about all of that, sexual abuse, pornography. We should be talking about sex and how great it is and what it was really created for. And,
exactly.
All these counterfeits are defiling and taking people down these journeys. And it's like, man, and the church isn't talking about it. That's another program we're rolling out for the church. Is like, wake up.
Yes. And let's get rid of the shame, and let's get rid of the keeping tabs and perfection, and let's get real, and let's talk about these.
Be a place where you bring your secrets, because you're coming for the healing, you're coming for the freedom, and that should be the place to do it. So that's why people are hungry, and they're following all these other gurus and other, because the authenticity and the wonder and the gifts and all of that isn't happening where it should be happening. So it's counterfeit over here, and people are running because they're starving.
They are.
So I'm rolling out real.
Absolutely. And which is so awesome. So exciting. All right. So what are some practices that you use to process your emotions in a healthy way?
I'm a big journaler. Always been a huge journaler. Like my very first journal was a Holly Hobby with a lock on it.
Me too.
You too.
That's kind of, so now you kind of know how old Elizabeth and I are.
Yeah. And it's better in your 50s, right? I mean, this is a good time. But I mean, I write and I process. And you know what? I'm also I will always have my AirPods and I will always have a podcast or something going on, or worship. Like I'm an auditory processor. So I have to film myself. Before I said, I'm not a garbage can. I'm not open for business anymore. But I am so conscious to what we fill ourselves with, who you hang around, what you listen to, what you read. It defines who you are. So I am constantly pouring in things that feed my soul and my spirit, and having deep conversations with those people too.
Well, and I love that recognition of, you're an auditory processor, because I think it's so important. I think sometimes we get stuck when we're trying to process and do things to be healthy. We kind of get stuck in this same pattern of, well, everybody's doing this or everybody's doing that, so that must be the healing for everybody. And that's not the case. Mm-hmm. That's not the case at all. You have to identify what is specific to you and know yourself well enough, and try some things and be okay with the fact that they don't work out as you're getting to know yourself. But I love how you pointed out that you know about yourself, the auditory piece, because that's different than some other people. So what feeds you isn't going to necessarily feed the next person. It's that getting to know yourself, and finding that thing that really feeds your soul. How do you live out? So the name of the podcast is F.E.E.L, Finding Empowerment, Embracing Layers. And this is kind of a all encompassing to what we've talked about, but talk about in kind of a wrap up, how you live that out, how you live out F.E.E.L.
Well, I think that for me, I practice being intentional, right? So feel the things that I do to feel. How do I feel good, take care of myself in that? But I try to spend a lot of alone time with my husband. I try to spend a lot of alone time with myself and God.
Yeah.
I have 3 children. I try to guard that time. And, for me, I'm a reader too. And I think just spending time, like people don't realize like I'm such an introvert. So for me, like all my giving is usually when I have to work and people, and then my family. Yeah. So when I have free time, I want to be alone. I'm like such a homebody, and I need a book, or I need, just AirPods and walking. But that feeds my soul. It fills me.
Yeah. And I love how you pointed out that you're an introvert, because if people were to meet you, they would never guess that in a million years.
No, so I can turn it on, but they say, if you get your energy from others, or if others take your energy,
exactly,
I can present as an extrovert, but then I'm depleted for days. And that's part of my mercurial. When I'm on, but I get refueled down here. This refuels me. I need this. Yeah. And people wouldn't guess that now.
No, and I love that. I think that we have to generally, as a culture, we think that we can identify people, because my husband Brady's the same way. He's an introvert, but he's a frontline, asking people for millions of dollars kind of guy, and has relationships and people will be shocked to know that when when he's done with the events and the appointments and the people on the weekends, he's laying low. We're not going out having a bunch of people over or going out to dinner parties, because that's his time to refill. So I love how I think that we have to kind of don't assume, because we don't just present one way. There's so much to us, and there's so much. So I love that you talked about that. So we are to our rapid fire. And so let's do rapid fire. And then I'm going to turn it over to you, because I want you to wrap up with talking about what's going to drop tomorrow, and anything else that you want to share about Sail Away Foundation, how you transitioned from Sail of Freedom to that, anything you want to talk about. It's going to be open forum to you. So name 5 activities that nourish you.
Weirdly, floral arranging. I know. And bubble baths. I'm like a huge bath girl. Live for a bathtub and candles. Walks. I like being alone and walking. But these are all alone things.
That's okay. That's how you get to be so dynamic when you're with people.
Yeah, those feed me. And then it is like laying on the couch with my husband and watching like the Hallmark channels. Because of what I do, I like to watch like Heart of Dixie, Chesapeake Shores.
Well, you gotta do. I mean, because with your work, you've got to have a place that's predictable, not traumatic, not shocking, not, all these things to counterbalance all of that.
Yeah. Simple. Then I'd say again, just, my kids, I love my kids. I don't know what, I don't get enough time with them. And so I can get them all, grab them and we do I'll get an Airbnb, special time.
Yeah. Yeah. And talk about, so this is kind of going off script, but I want you to speak to this because you just got off of this kind of extended rest time and you had this really fun name for it, the Radical Sabbatical.
I did.
So with all that you do, because I think this is important for people to hear, you're head of the Sail Away Foundation, you've got Free with E, you've just written a book, you were involved with Sail Up Freedom for years, you co-founded that, you found time to take, was it a month?
Yeah, 5 weeks. But I was told, I was given a sabbatical in 2018. Look how long it took me to do it. I was supposed to go in 18. I was supposed to go right after I got married in 19, but there's always something comes up. So this year there was so much coming up, but I'm like, you know what? I am doing it. I'm officially not with Sail of Freedom anymore. It'll mark my transition. And I did it 5 weeks and I rented Airbnbs in different places. We did with my family or we stayed with friends and it was awesome, and it was hard to not I'd come home and people would try to call me. So 2 days I'd be back and then I'd leave again. But I'm going to get really good at it. That's my goal.
Awesome. And how did you feel coming back from it? Was it as refreshing as you hoped?
It was. You know what? I'm and I had fresh ideas. Someone goes, oh, you can tell you got, because this thing just came together, the program that I'm rolling out. I had excitement again. I had bandwidth to have emotion and feelings. I was sort of burnt out for a little bit there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a lot of stuff with my family. I had some personal things with some of my family that was a hard year. So I needed that sabbatical and I took it, and you guys should take it too.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted you to share because Elizabeth is got a lot of great things she's doing. She's responsible for a lot of things and is in demand. She could be doing something all the time, but she's made a choice to mark out that time. And I think it's so important for us to know that that's okay. And I loved when I saw that you were doing that because I think yes, because it goes back to that living by example thing. If we're going to talk to women about these things, then we got to walk it out ourselves. And that's a prime example of you walking it out. So I wanted you to share that. Before we jump into all the cool things you're doing, 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
I love that. The next 6 months, I want to feel ignited because I feel I'm building new things. So ignited, but peace. I want peace and I want ease. And I want, this sounds crazy because I want ignited and I want new, but I want peace and ease. And I want favor. I want unprecedented favor because when we're in this flow, things are easier. So I want the new, I want the excitement. I want to ignite things, but I want it peaceful, easy, and slow.
Love that though. And and that's again goes to those layers of who you are and how those things can come about for you.
Yeah.
All right. Talk to us about what's rolling out tomorrow.
Yes, it is. You know what? When my book came out, I had this whole speaking tour. I had so much going on. And then COVID hit. Literally, my book came out end of January. I launched in DC. I had congresswomen there speaking, opening, beautiful. And then I did Chicago, had a couple Florida, and then maybe Houston, and done. Everything was canceled. And I'm like, darn, I got this book. And, it was just no momentum. And I think it was an ego and, and I went through a lot of what do I do? Because one thing I want to say is that when it came out, I didn't feel like I was ready to promote myself. I'm very good at promoting Sail of Freedom, or I was good at promoting others. Promoting yourself is a whole different deal. And I think that year, God, I felt like I got a curriculum downloaded to me and it was powerful. And I started just asking, who wants to do a group? I put together a curriculum with my book and people started saying yes. And I had this 4-week, 5-week, and it was deep, deep, deep. but I've been doing it for like a year and a few months, and women are asking for more. They're like, it's too short. We need more. We want more of you than an hour a week for 4 weeks. Like, do more. And I've wrestled with, the world has all these coaches, and I'm a clinician. I have a master's in clinical psych, but
yeah.
I don't want to do that. I feel like we pay a therapist once a week and we're dependent. And as a coach, the world is looking for coaches. And I think there's a lot of counterfeit out there in that market. I want to be able to bring the real deal. And so I'm rolling out a program, and it's called A Journey to More, because it's everything that we spoke about. So it's a 90-day program, and I'm going to have a few different options and programs that I'm doing. But this first one is like a pilot program. So if someone wants to get in it, they should call me right away, go online. You'll see how to get in touch with me and do a strategy session, because I want that woman that you and I are talking about. That woman that's on the brink of knowing there's more. Like, she's done some work, she's done her work, but she's like, there's more, I'm hungry. Some of the things I'm like, are you settling for the same broken patterns? Do you know you're made for more, but somehow you can't get over that threshold? Are you reacting to some memories in your life that still feel like a lightning bolt? Like, are you ready to be done with that? There's more. So it's going to be deep. It's going to be me authentically crazy and diving people.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome. And I'm so excited. I was so excited to hear this was launching and the timing of all this, to get to share this, because people, get involved, check it out. It's going to be in our show notes, all the information.
Yes.
You will not be sorry about any time spent with this woman and her journey.
If they want to do it, they reach out to me and do a free 30-minute strategy session, and then boom, off to the races.
Awesome. Okay. So that's going to all be on the flyer that we have on the website.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. And that's going to be on our social media as well, at Embracing Layers, on Instagram. It's going to be at embracinglayers.com, and as well as anything else you want to learn about Elizabeth, her work. Talk about Sail Away Foundation a little bit too.
What we're doing at the Sail Away. So I had founded an organization, F.E.E.L, that we learned how to do it all. Like, we built stuff. I always say, because I moved to Florida, Sarasota from Chicago. So I always say it's like learning in a little petri dish, but we perfected, right? We perfected some things like housing and law enforcement. We created one of the first prostitution court diversion programs where children were arrested for prostitution at 13, and 3 minor arrests equal to felony. We'd get these little 18-year-olds with 20 felonies because they've been sold for sex. And so all these things we were doing on a local level. And now with the foundation, like, my heart was, how do we scale? We have a prevention program for kids. There's bills actually right now in DC, 2 are on the floor. Another one's dropping soon. And there is a mandate coming to educate K through 12, our kids, on trafficking and coercion and how to speak up. Our curriculum is called Speak Up. And I'm so excited because it's going to go across the nation and empower our kids so they don't get groomed and they don't stay quiet and they don't have to undo all this stuff that we spend our lives undoing. I want to get them young and get them free. So I'm passionate about scaling. We were 25,000 kids at Sail of Freedom. Now I'm like, how do we get to 2 million? How do we take the world? How do we reach every child and give them a voice? Nothing I'm more passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that information will also be in the show notes about learning more about that. So you said it's throughout the nation. Is it going to be throughout the world, or where's that at?
The K through 12 or what?
Yeah. Or the K through 12. Like, is that for United States schools? So
U.S. Congress has some bills that are coming out. A couple are out already. We'll put information about the bills. We'll give you that as well, because people should call their congressmen or senators. Their senators have a bill on their floor and in Congress, and we need to make the phone calls, like, pass it. And if you're an educator and you want to open up your school, we're doing a national pilot program. Yale and Michigan State are doing the research, and I would love to see it, different regions around the country want to be a pilot partner. So an opportunity to get your school ahead of it and get your kids protected language.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, and I mean, I know this, but, people are always so surprised or so shocked when they hear how these kids are groomed and how easy it is to get to them. And
every zip code, right?
Yeah, in the country. Mm-hmm. But there's also, this is what you're here to help them with, because we can be proactive. We can prevent it. We can be on top of it, but we have to acknowledge that it's there.
Absolutely. And you know what? Now 1 out of 9 children are coerced by a trafficker on their own phone in their own bedroom. You don't even know what your kids are doing. And that's why this training is so vital. We have the Speak Up curriculum for the schools, but if you go to our website on Sail Away Foundation, there is a link for the Cool Aunt series that families could download at home. And it's written by one of our global ambassadors who was trafficked. And it's cool. It's fun. It's not scary, but it teaches the moms with all their kids that aren't getting this curriculum, maybe how to start talking about it, because we have to protect our future generations for sure. Game on.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's passionate about it, as you can tell. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for this time. I know your time is precious, and I appreciate it that you gave it to me and to our audience and to this podcast. People, you need to know more about this woman and all that she's doing. So again, show notes, embracinglayers.com, at Embracing Layers on Instagram. Thank you again. Take care, audience. Have a wonderful week. And let us know if you have any questions. You can contact us through embracinglayers.com. There's information on how to get a hold of us if you want more information about any of our people or episodes, or you'd like to be a guest yourself. So thank you and have a great week.